Welcome to this webinar. This particular topic, when I saw what I would be speaking about today, and also when I realized I didn't have time to change it, I was actually very surprised because this particular topic was from an article that I do not believe was ever published on BCG. So it's a fairly personal topic. And actually, I think you may find quite interesting. By interesting, that it's an interesting topic. And the presentation is a story, and then the story will reach into what unhappy legal careers have, because a lot of the mistakes that people make in their lives are also often quite related to things that you may personally experience in your personal life. So that's what it's about. I'm actually a little bit embarrassed that I'm talking about this topic today, because I certainly did not think that I would be, but I didn't have time to change it. So I'm going to talk about it. Now, a couple points about the webinar. The first point is that this is a live webinar. Following the presentation, I will go into Q&A and answer any questions that anyone has about the webinar on the topic, and then after that we will conclude. So typically you can ask questions about any topics that you may have about the webinar. Okay, when I was in my first year of law school, I met someone that I had almost an instant connection with, fell in love, and someone that I felt like I connected with very powerfully. And the person seemed to be, at the time, something that was everything that I was very wanted. It was the same personality, same type of background, all the things that a lot of times people believe are very important when you're entering into a new relationship with someone. So you meet someone and you're single, and then you meet a lot of people, but someone comes along and you think that they're the perfect person for you. We started spending all of our time together during the school year. We spent most of our summer together, and then next school year, which I guess would have been my second year of law school, we moved in together. And right after we moved in together, I remember we went to a party, and the party was, somewhere in the law school campus. It was just at someone's house. And while I was there, in front of me, I noticed this person that I had been connected to suddenly throwing herself at someone else. And I didn't really realize what was going on. I thought she might be drunk, and pulled her out of this party for a few days. And it was when you see something like, it can be very triggering, because what am I doing with my life? Why am I living with this person? What's going on? So we ended up fighting about it. And then by the winter of that year, which was my second year of law school, meaning right before the winter break, I figured out that she was involved with the same person. So I moved out, and just very confused. And then by the end of the year, we ended up moving back in together. And then when I worked in New York over the summer in a law firm, we lived there together. And by the fall, the two of us were engaged. So it was just this on and off thing that was going back and forth. Again, this topic is very personal and not something that I'm necessarily that excited to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it because it has a lot of things that will relate to your career. On the night of my engagement, that we got engaged right when we came back for what had been my third year of law school. She told me that in the previous year, while I thought that after my first year of law school, that she'd still been involved with this person from the time she met him at the party. So this obviously was very upsetting. And then this same relationship continued while I was in my third year of law school. You might be wondering what happened. I'm going to draw a lot of conclusions between this particular thing that happened and also what happens with legal careers. But when I got into my third year of law school, again, she was involved with the same guy. She moved out and gave the ring back. And all of this continued until by the spring, she had come back and we were re-engaged. And then I moved to Michigan to do a clerkship with a federal judge. And during this clerkship, she actually lived with me the whole time. She wasn't working and there to support me, which was very nice. And then we were scheduled to be married in August. My clerkship was scheduled to end in, I believe, May or June or something like that. We were getting married in August. She took a trip away from me to the East Coast in, July or so, maybe it was June, and ended up having an affair with one of her friends. And that happened there. And then again, the engagement was broken off and it had been mostly paid for. And so I moved. She didn't move with me to Los Angeles. My clerkship was over. And so then I got to Los Angeles, and the same, she kept calling me every night, started traveling there at her own expense several times, and wanted to get back together and re-engaged. And so we did this. We got re-engaged again, moved to Los Angeles, and she moved to Los Angeles. And within a year, we'd planned another marriage, and finally married here. So later in New York. And you could imagine like this on and off, this sort of thing going on again and again. And why are you committing to a person like this? Why are you getting married? And sure enough, it was a very strange wedding, because I realized at the time I wasn't making good choices. But I just went along with it because I figured I had all this time invested in this relationship, and it was a good decision. But at the time, I remember drinking probably more than I'd ever drank at this wedding. And likely it was because the whole thing was just very confusing and conflicting. What was I doing entering into something like this? And I will say that's an important thing to know too, is one of the reasons for probably being so conflicted is that here I was getting married, and I was also at the time, like many people that will watch this webinar now and in the future, in a career that was something that very confusing. I didn't know. I was conflicted and confused. I had sunk costs into being an attorney because that's something I wanted to do. So all of these things were very confusing. About 6 months in this marriage, she was in a profession where she was working for very wealthy people. And at that point, she started spending a lot of time away from home with one of her clients that was very wealthy. And then one day I remember returning home from work, and I'd forgotten something, and I heard her, and she didn't hear me come home. And I heard her in the other room talking about having an affair with this person, and was pretty shocked. When I confronted her with it, she denied it. And then a few months later, after this, process server showed up in my office with divorce papers. And then, of course, what happened, and again, this is a very embarrassing story. I can't even believe this is a webinar, but a few weeks after the divorce, she called me on the phone, begged me to take her back, told me she had no idea what she was going to do, could not live without me. Life was not worth living without me, and all that sort of thing. And I called one of her family members and told them I was worried about her. And then they told me that she spent the weekend with this guy from law school that I mentioned at the beginning. And this particular, she'd figured out that it wasn't going to work out and was unhappy. At that point, I'd moved on and found someone else, became very happy in a marriage that lasted, that still is going on over 15 years. And I should have said something like that to her at the beginning, should have moved on. And moved on. This thing was obviously insane. People make very dumb mistakes when they're young. And there's all sorts of mistakes that I'm going to talk about here that, even though you may not have been through such a similar situation as this, can really teach you quite a bit about the things that you need to do to protect your career and your sanity. These are very big lessons, I think. In order to make them, I am talking about some stuff that's personal, but at the same time, you can get a lot of lessons out of these sorts of things because you are doing them. Most people are making the same mistakes with their career that I made early on. And if you understand these mistakes, you can actually be happier and much more successful in your legal career than if you don't. One day, when I look at legal careers, one of the strengths that I have, I think, is because I've been personally involved in so many different people's legal careers. I see resumes every day. I see mistakes. I see people making the same mistakes over and over again. I see people pushed away by legal careers. I see people unhappy and committing and staying there when they shouldn't. I see people that get into drugs and alcohol and things because they don't know how to deal with the issues that they're facing. I see people get taken advantage of when they shouldn't be. All these things I see in legal careers every day. And these are the same mistakes that I made. And when I see these mistakes, I actually get very motivated on a personal level because I want to help you and I want to help people that are making these same mistakes with their legal careers. Now, a legal career isn't as personal as a romantic relationship, but a romantic relationship when you're young is no different than thinking something looks attractive, is no different than thinking a person looks attractive. What do? You may base everything on the wrong decisions. Is it right to become an attorney and to do all these things because it pays a lot of money and is a bright, shiny object? You have to understand that. So some areas are really going to create issues in with both your relationships and your career. So I'm going to go through some of the similarities that people are making that are similar to the ones that I made. And hopefully this is going to provide you profound insights into the mistakes that you don't need to make with your legal career. And honestly, just learning about one or two of these could make a complete difference in the course of your legal career and your life. These are very powerful lessons that I think can help you a great deal. So one of the things that people do in their legal careers is they get secure, they stop improving, and they take the employer or another person for granted. And I'll explain to you how that works. By the time my first wife and I got married, I would say both of us were at the worst. A lot of people try to look good for their wedding and slim down and get in shape and fit in your dresses and things. And we did the exact opposite. There wasn't a lot of reciprocity. I wasn't buying flowers or candy. We weren't planning dinners. We weren't doing nice things for each other, the things that couples do to keep things going. And the relationship at that point was really not even that strong. And then as this marriage progressed, both sides kept taking the other one for granted. So stopped taking my wife out as much, doing things around the house and same thing, and everything went downhill. And then pretty soon it got to the point where she wasn't letting me know when she was coming home at night. And I even stopped caring. And then both of us stopped trying hard. So in a lot of employment situations, and this is a major problem that you may have with where you're working, is people will start taking their jobs for granted. They may not do all their assignments as quickly as they could, may not do them as thoroughly as they could. They may be asked to do certain things that they're supposed to do. They may have started their careers coming into work early and staying late and having a lot of enthusiasm. And then they may do other things as well that aren't positive. And when an employer sees that you're taking them for granted and you no longer seem to appreciate the job, that you no longer seem as enthusiastic, that your work quality and the passion you're putting into it is going down, a lot of them will get resentful. And because they all want to have people around them that don't take them for granted and appreciate them and the work. The employer wants to feel appreciated. The employer wants to believe that your job is something that you care about, because when you're working in any employment in any firm, if someone comes in and they interview and that person is very excited about working there and really wants to do a good job and try hard and looks up to the people that they're trying to get a job with, that employer is going to be much more likely to hire them. And a lot of times when I would say the law firms want to hire younger associates than more senior associates. And a lot of times the younger people are still very enthusiastic and they don't take the legal profession for granted. And they are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. People that are very enthusiastic, they want to work as hard and they want to have as much value as possible. And they want people that are motivated to improve and get better and better at their jobs. And that's the same thing that's important in our relationships with other people. We don't want spouses or significant others to take us for granted and think that they're always going to be there and not feel like they need to be nice to us. And it's the same thing in your relationships. If you take people for granted and you're not improving your relationship, then that's going to hurt you and it's not good. And so you need to do whatever you can to make your relationship stronger with people. You need to create a better bond. And this goes in your personal relationships. You need to constantly work on them. And you can't assume in any relationship that you're going to treat the other person poorly or not pay attention to them without there being consequences. And everyone needs to feel valued and important. And the more people value us and the more important you make them feel, then the better off you're going to be. And with a job, anytime you're in any employment situation, and a lot of people are like this, they get into employment situations and then they stop being enthusiastic about the employer, and they start taking it for granted. Sometimes they're even resentful. They're resentful that there's too many hours, or they're resentful of the firm and different things about the firm that could be different. And when you start getting resentful of your employer, you take it for granted, then the employer no longer feels as good about you. And if the employer doesn't feel as good about you, then they're not going to want to advance you, that they're not going to be nice to you, and you're going to be more unhappier. And what was going on with my ex-wife, for example, or what is going on with any relationships? If you don't make someone feel valued, whether it's your employer or someone else, the more you're going to grow apart from that employer, that person. And if people want to feel attractive and valued and special, and so do employers. And if they don't feel that way, then things are going to grow apart. And you really can't take anything for granted or anyone for granted for an extended period of time and have a fulfilling relationship. I wanted to bring up a couple of quick points too about job search and how this is related. So if I take a candidate, say I take a candidate that went to Columbia Law School and is at this awesome AmLaw 100 law firm in New York City somewhere, and they want to work. Job market's very slow for, say, corporate attorneys. They will go to work in a small firm with attorneys without good qualifications, the same qualifications, doing less important corporate work and so forth. That employer they're not going to get a job in a firm that's that far beneath where they're working. No one is going to give them a job, and no one's going to interview them. They're not going to get interviewed because that employer is going to feel like that particular candidate is just going to not appreciate working there, is going to not make the employer feel good about themselves. Who wants to, if you go to like Pace Law School in New York, which is a good law school, and there's a bunch of people from Pace and New York Law School in your law firm, and you're doing corporate work for small corporate clients, you're not going to want to hire someone that's Harlan Fiske Stone Scholar from Columbia working at some awesome law firm, Goodwin Procter or something, and to come in, because that's not going to make you feel good about yourself. You're going to feel like you're surrounded by people that, you're just not going to do it. And this is how firms do. They want people to look up to them. They want to feel important. They don't want to be taken for granted. They don't want to feel like they're not as smart or not as good as you. And so the same thing happens in relationships. If you take people for granted, then they won't like you. And then if you don't make your relationship stronger with people, the same thing's going to happen. And the truth is, everyone has good characteristics and is valuable. But most law firms have good things about them. Otherwise, clients wouldn't be giving them money. But if you start taking people and things for granted, then it doesn't work out. And there are also people out there that will not make you feel granted. So that will not make you take you for granted. An example, you may be you may be their dream. You may be the kind of person that is an absolute perfect fit for someone, and then vice versa. You may find someone that's an absolute perfect fit for you. And the same thing goes for legal jobs. So many people drop out of working in law firms, or they drop out of practicing law completely because they never find the type of employer that makes them feel good about themselves. And they never are able to make an employer feel good about themselves. So a lot of times I see people doing things like, they want to get into, maybe they have average qualifications and they want to get into some super competitive firm where everyone has the best qualifications imaginable. They're doing whatever they can. And then they get in there and then they're treated second-class citizens, the homecoming king or queen dating class nerd or something. They're not treated the way they want to be. And then they're unhappy. And so you have to put yourself in positions where people are going to love you for your talents and where you're going to love being there and happy and no one's going to take you for granted, and you're not going to take the employer for granted. And most employers know that they can find people that really want to work there. And oftentimes it takes getting rid of existing people or allowing for attrition to see these sorts of people. So it's very common for law firms to hope or even force out attorneys when they get to be 1, 2, 3 years of practice, sometimes 4, because those attorneys start taking the employer for granted. They stop being as enthusiastic. They stop trying as hard. They start being more professional and not necessarily connecting with the people. And the law firm wants to bring in people that are going to try hard and be enthusiastic again. And it's the best employers. They only keep people around who don't take them for granted. And then the more secure people who value themselves the most are only likely to keep those around who don't take them for granted. So a strong law firm isn't going to keep people around that take it for granted. And neither will people do that in a strong relationship. A lot of employers believe that this is the case for a lot of very large employers, unfortunately, and very prestigious employers, but they believe that because they're paying you so much money, that they can give you a lot of work, they can treat you often poorly, and because of the amount of money they're giving you, and then they can let you go whenever they want after all of the sacrifice and so forth. They believe that money entitles them to do that. Money entitles them to take it for granted. And if you are treated that way, you're often going to resent working in law firms, and just as you would resent people that don't treat you well over a long period of time. And so you may never be secure. But if you do feel secure, then you'll run into problems. And law firms expect their attorneys, as they get more senior, to bill lots of hours and develop business. And law firms expect you to improve your legal skills and then search out work and do your best. And the best attorneys are continually thinking. They're not taking their employer for granted. They're not sitting there and just doing work. They're believing that they need to continue giving more and more value to their employers and constantly questioning how they can do better and how they can improve. And you should never be in a position, if you're in a law firm, where you're taking your employer for granted. And what that means is you always want to be trying to bring in more business. You always want to bring in business. You always want to try to be doing more. You always want to try to be billing more hours. You want to always try to basically not take any job for granted, because if you do, you're going to get into trouble. And this is what happens, by the way. People sit here and they go into these roles inside of jobs and they stay for as long as they can. They get dependent upon a certain salary or level of pay. And then they basically make that their North Star is getting paid as much as possible, but they forget about the fact that they have to continually figure out ways to do more value beyond just doing work. They have to be able to develop business. They can never take any role or title for granted. Law firms all the time give people partner titles, but unless that partner is able to deliver significantly over time and improve in terms of business and so forth, the title means very little. And so you have to realize in any relationship, and then also in any legal job, you have to be aware of your weaknesses. Then you have to work on them, and you also have to constantly reinforce your strengths. And honestly, the most successful attorneys out there are constantly questioning their shortcomings, and they're working on their shortcomings. They're looking for their weaknesses. A lot of them that I see, they're setting goals. They set goals daily and weekly, and they realize what they can improve at and how they can fix things and how they can do better. And I remember there was a recruiter in our company that isn't here anymore and retired, but she'd been at her previous job before working for us for 20 years. And then she worked for our company for 18 years. And I would speak with her more than every 6 months, but doing performance reviews every 6 months. And when I spoke to her, she would always demand that I critique her work more harshly and find more things wrong, and then allow her to go on improving those things. And just constantly looking for more feedback. And what do I see that she can do better? How do I see that? Then her sharing her list of things that she believes she could do better at. And many times these were things that I didn't even see. She'd written down, taken journals of things that she believed she could improve at. And her desire to constantly improve made her very successful. She never took her job or her performance or anything for granted until the day she retired. Literally to the day she retired, she was constantly thinking about what she could do to improve, what she could do, how she could get better. And what's very interesting about her, and I'll just put this as an aside, is at the time she was the only recruiter we ever had that hadn't gone to law school. And we were hiring all these great recruiters that had gone to all these top law schools. And most of them felt, because I'm a recruiter and an attorney, there's no reason for me to be harsh with myself I should be applauded for the fact that I went to UC Berkeley Law School and I'm now in this role as this recruiter. People should be coming to me and my talent, my skill speaks for itself because I worked in a large law firm. And those people, by the way, would come and go. Like they were at their last firm a year. They would stay with us a year. If they were last, and they would take their positions for granted and not keep improving and make far less money than this woman that constantly questioned everything and always have less employment stability. So you could never, ever take your job for granted. And you could never take having access to work for granted. You could never take your clients for granted. You just can't do that. If you take a job for granted, then you're going to be someone that ends up losing a job. You're going to be someone that typically doesn't do as well. You're going to be someone that is not going to have a great career. A lot of times attorneys will even take their clients for granted. They'll believe that the client should stay with them just because they're an attorney. They have a history and then they lose clients. Or sometimes they'll overbill clients. All sorts of mistakes happen, but you just have to put yourself in a situation where you're not taken for granted. And the better off you do with that, the better off your career is going to be. A lot of times, another thing that happens, very serious in people's legal careers, is not committing to a single employer or person. People that have a series of bad relationships are usually not able to commit. Now, I don't mean committing in a whatever, not cheating on people, so type things. I just mean an inability to commit. And people with very difficult legal careers often also have a very difficult time committing. They're not committed. Their heart is never in whatever employer they're with. They're just not there. And in both instances, a lot of these people just never commit. And so there's no reason to commit or stay committed to an employer where you're going to be undervalued and held back and unhappy. It's just, there's no reason to do that. And I'm not suggesting there is. And there's also no reason to do the same with a person as well. If someone doesn't treat you well and so forth, and you're not happy with them and it's not a good relationship, then there, of course, is no reason to be committed either. But to make an employment or romantic relationship work in the long term, you really do need the ability to commit. It's very important that you commit. You need to find an employer that you can commit with, and hopefully friends and other people as well. And honestly, most attorneys never actually commit to an employer. Most employers never even, a lot of attorneys, not all, but and not even the substantial proportion of them, but a lot of attorneys never even commit to a practice area. They may decide 2, 5, 10 years on, they want to be in another practice area. And a lot of attorneys also never commit to a practice setting at all. They become distracted by different bright, shiny objects in their environment to look better. They believe that there's no reason to commit. And because there's no reason to commit, then there's no reciprocity. They have no reciprocity from employers because they've committed. They don't have any reciprocity from other people. And a lot of people that are unhappy in a firm will get to their third or fourth firm and fifth firm sometimes and believe that maybe they need a different firm. Maybe they need to work in a different practice setting, which may be working in-house or for the government, or maybe they need to relocate and put themselves in a different city. And again, it's all there for the taking, the belief if the person moves. But the problem is, unless you commit, you're never really going to know you're never going to know what would happen if you did commit. So the failure to commit just creates many problems. And if you don't know what you want, you're never really going to get it. I'll tell you just a couple quick stories about commitment. So I remember I was in my second law firm I was in was a law firm in Los Angeles. It was called Dewey Ballantine. It's no longer in existence, but it was a New York-based firm that had an office in LA. And I think they had opened their office in something like 1990 or whatever. And so by the time I'd been there, maybe it was earlier in the 80s, by the time I'd been there, they'd been there a long time. But they'd never made a partner in that office. And there was an associate that we were at a party, and the associate was talking to a partner there. And he said, no one's ever made partner in this office. And the partner said to him, but no one's ever stayed long enough to be considered to be a partner. It's very interesting. No one had ever committed. The truth of the matter is, like with my ex-wife, we were generally quite happy when we were together, and we enjoyed doing things together, and we shared our thoughts and were supportive of each other. And she wanted to be a good girlfriend and wife. And we were happy together most of the time we were together. But from her standpoint, she could not do it because there was always something guiding her that she thought was more important than necessarily being with me. And it's just a commitment type issue. She'd grown up poor, but not wealthy. She continually was envious of people that had a lot of financial resources and wanted to climb out of the position that she saw that she had grown up with and get different types of social introduction, status, and money that I couldn't give her. So for that reason, was not committed. And she came to believe this stuff is important because of things that had happened to her earlier in life. So this lack of commitment was not something I could control, and it overwhelmed sensibilities that may have been guiding her. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that with her, because everyone comes with different types of baggage, and everyone comes with different types of baggage in their legal careers. But because of the fact that she was unable to commit, I was never happy. And I knew that something else was guiding her, and I was angry about it. And she also felt that something else was guiding her, that she could also be more reserved and in a relationship. And because I wasn't committed and couldn't trust her, I took actions to protect myself financially that I otherwise would not have taken. Did things with money before marriage and so forth, and took the right action that protected myself. It's the same thing with a committing to employer. Now, a lot of times people come into working in law firms where they know they're not going to be in a law firm long term and they're not going to commit. They may want to start their own business at some point, doing something related or unrelated to the practice of law. They may start in a law firm and know that eventually they want to open up their own law firm. They may start in another law firm and know that eventually they want to go in-house, or they may start in a law firm and know that eventually they want to go to work for the government, or they may start in a law firm and know that eventually they want to go into academia. There are a lot of people like this. And I would say that a lot of graduates of certain law schools, you can almost guarantee that they want to go into the academia or the government. Other people, it's more likely they'll start their own practice. And there's all sorts of things that you may not be committed. Sometimes people may get a job as a contract attorney or staff attorney in a law firm and not commit. A lot of times, by the way, what happens is if you're an attorney in a big law firm and you decide that you no longer want to practice in a big law firm and you go do something that's very common in some job where you go in-house and you want to come back to that law firm, the law firm won't bring you back as an associate. They'll bring you back as like a staff attorney or contract attorney because they know you won't commit. And so very few people, by the way, are committed to their practice area and their legal employer or even their practice setting. And because of that, very few of them have employment security. They're not committed. The law firm and the person they're working for can pick up on that. And once they pick up on that, that is very difficult for you, because you will have a very hard time moving forward, in your career, be a very hard time succeeding in the long run, and a very difficult time ever getting what you want. And this is just what happens right now. I just want to be very clear to you. If you are not committed to practicing law, if you are not committed to doing something in the legal profession, whether it's starting your own practice or whether it's, I don't know what that would be, but if you are not committed to something, that is going to create a lot of long-term problems for you, because if you're not committed, you're not being to put your heart and soul into it. If you're not committed, people are going to pick up on that. If you're not committed, all these bad things are going to happen to you that wouldn't happen if you were committed. In my particular case, I spent almost a decade of my life with someone who was unable to commit. That's time that was thrown away that could have been put into a happier, loving, more productive relationship. Just as you may be doing the same thing with your career. You may be spending emotional energy and dealing with the kind of stuff I was with, continuous disappointment, a lack of stability and all that thing in my life. And this is what employers deal with all the time. This is very common for employers. They don't know who they can trust and who's committed and who's not. And because of that, they constantly need to be looking for new people. Some law firms will just hire people as a matter of course, even if they don't believe they need anybody at the moment because they don't know who's committed. And this is especially true in a lot of large law firms. They just don't know who's committed. And they always will, they'll bring new people on, they'll train those people and they'll get them up to speed with work. And then after all that effort and time they put into that, the people will leave because they never were committed. And people who do the work and are unhappy in their jobs don't give it all. This hurts the employer. This also hurts the employer's clients. And I just want you to understand like how much more comes through when you're committed than the opposite, because very few people are able to commit to anything. And it's extremely important to employers. And they make their hiring decisions based on this level of commitment. And it's arguably, in my opinion, the most essential thing. You need to be committed to any employer that you want to work in. And you need to show that commitment when you're applying to a new position. You need to give the employer the idea that you're going to be committed to whatever that is. And so let me just tell you some of the ways that employers can pick up on this commitment. This will also show you how you can get more interviews, how you can get more jobs when you're applying to, because there's so many ways that this commitment comes through and things that you're doing that you may not even be aware of that show a lack of commitment or commitment. The first thing is your experience, and your resume will show your commitment. The best way to try to describe people that are working in multiple practice areas at the same time would be the same as trying to show someone who's tried to date multiple people at the same time. If you have a bunch of practice areas, like you say, I do trademark prosecution, I do commercial litigation and real estate, that's no different than someone that's trying to date multiple people at the same time. They never have developed a solid foundation with anyone. And how could they? They don't know what they want. They're doing all these different things at one time, and they're just dabbling in things and never really committed. And it doesn't work in relationships. I don't know if you would trust someone that had that many things going on or not. I remember this one person this is anyway, too long ago, but I went out on this date with this person and nothing ever worked out. But then I communicated with her, I don't know, about 6 months later, or she touched base with me or something. And I asked her how things were going. And she said she was dating like 6 or 7 people, but wasn't sleeping with every one of them. And I thought that was crazy. This is something I didn't pick up on. And a lot of people do dabble. They dabble in relationships, they dabble in jobs, they dabble in employment, and employer candidates that look like they're trying to do a bunch of different things often do not get the attention of employers. But in contrast, the resumes of focused attorneys focused on one practice area get jobs. And I'll be completely honest with you, at BCG, we used to just work with attorneys, this is years ago, but attorneys that went to the very best law schools, that worked in the very best firms. But what I realized after having done that for a long period of time is that those aren't the candidates that really are most in demand, and the most in demand by the largest firms. So the candidates that are most in demand are anyone that is focused on a practice area. That practice area could be personal injury or workers' comp. It could be some forms of IP. It could be real estate, whatever it is. If you're focused on one thing, you're suddenly much more attractive to the market because you basically are saying, this is what I want. This is who I am. It shows commitment. And the same thing is if you not had a lot of relationships and each one of them you made an effort at. And I've placed attorneys in all sorts of practice areas. One of them is lemon law, which is just basically suing an automaker when a car is not functioning correctly. The insurance defense could be project finance, everything in between. But the people that get placed by recruiters, and which means the ones that the market is willing to pay for and compensate a recruiter for, all they have to have is a focused background. They have to just do one thing. It doesn't matter what that is, but almost any attorney that does one thing, even in many cases, an older attorney that you typically wouldn't think of would be marketable. If the attorney does one thing, then they're almost always going to be marketable. And if you have a focused resume, it doesn't really matter where you went to law school or how you did there. Having a focus on one thing is huge. You could go to a third-tier law school and do okay. Then you could go and get a LLM in healthcare law. And maybe you were a a nurse or a paramedic before you went to law school. And then you come out and you work for a couple of years doing healthcare law in a law firm. That level of focus, I'm telling you, is going to make you marketable, not just in whatever geographic area you are, but probably all over the United States, because law firms love and employers love and clients love people that are focused. Think if you were a client and then you needed a healthcare attorney, would you want to hire just some random person that had done 5 different things, or would you want to hire someone with a deep connection and focus to that practice area? And a lot of attorneys that go to often the best law schools and did very well there, they often don't have any particular focus on their resume. Sometimes they'll talk about a bunch of pro bono work that they did, and then some litigation or in different practice areas, and they can have a much harder time getting a job than someone that shows that level of commitment. And again, in almost all candidates, in almost all cases where I place someone, that get placed are the ones that have a very focused background that shows a commitment to their practice area. That's it. And people benefit tremendously when they look like they can do one thing. And this focused experience, when employers look at their background, is exactly what employers want to see. They want to see someone committed to a practice area. That's really what I would say probably the most important thing for an attorney. And it's better to have commitment to one practice area than to say you have experience in 2. It's better to say you've done nothing but patent work than to also say you've done patent and tax work. A patent client's not going to come to a patent attorney and say, I hope they also do tax law, or someone that needs tax law work isn't going to go to an attorney and be excited that they also do patent law. So you can't believe that everything you've done makes you more valuable. What makes you valuable is having a commitment to doing one thing, to being committed, and not to pushing yourself all over the place. And if your resume communicates that type of commitment, you're going to look like an expert and someone that knows what they want. And it's exactly what people want. Just think about it in romantic relationships. You meet someone, and they also love video games and going to, I don't know, medieval times or medieval fairs. And I don't know what it would be, but people that you share interests with and are committed to something is important. Shared hobbies, shared experiences, shared backgrounds, and those sorts of things. And just employers want people that know what they do not want people that don't know what they want. And you wouldn't want the same thing either. Why would you, if you were to hire someone, for example, to do work around I'd like to give this example because it resonates with a lot of people, but if you wanted to hire someone, for example, to take care of your children while you were at work, and I guess you'd call that a nanny or whatever, would you want someone that said, hey, I might want to do this nanny work full time? I don't know, but I'm also interested in thinking about going to engineering school. I may want to be an engineer, and I'm not sure that I'll do this long term because I'm also looking at some jobs working in hotels, and so I may want to do that as well. You wouldn't want to hire that person. You want to hire someone that was dedicated, and you just can't. You can't be things to all people. If you try to do everything and be everything in terms of working for law firms and so forth, it's not going to get you anywhere. Anytime you show lack of commitment on your resume, that does not help you. The practice setting you're in shows whether you're committed or not. Once most attorneys leave law firms and go in-house, they really, in very rare instances, are ever hired by a law firm again. It's just commitment 101. Law firms know that if you leave a law firm, then you're no longer committed to that practice setting, and you'll likely leave in the future. So if you're not committed to one practice setting, employers aren't going to take a chance on you. So I wanted to make sure I drive this point home, because this is one of the most important points that you can understand. If you can understand the importance of your commitment to your practice area, you should also understand your commitment to the practice setting. So this is what happens. If you leave a law firm and you go in-house, or you go to a political think tank or something, or do something different, a law firm knows that you are not committed to working in a law firm. All the stuff that comes with being committed to a law firm, working for clients, working on more and more sophisticated issues and given more responsibilities, more time goes on, learning how to develop business, working collaboratively with other attorneys that have to do good work to get paid by clients. All these things that you may be doing that in a law firm that you're not doing in other practice settings just shows a complete lack of commitment. And it's very difficult, if not impossible, many times for attorneys to move from in-house to back to law firms. I see people all the time. They worked at a very prestigious law firm in Silicon Valley as a corporate attorney. Then at 5, 7, 10 years out, they decide maybe they went to Stanford Law School and they did something I don't know, but then they decide they want to go in-house. Even if the corporate market is bursting at the seams with demand, those attorneys have a very difficult time getting back in. That's just how it is. As a matter of fact, I can't recall, with the exception of 1 or 2 instances, it was one person in Portland that had been the client of a law firm, meaning it just doesn't happen. Once you show you're not committed to a practice setting, you're in trouble. And if you want to work for the government, and you can work for the government, there's nothing wrong with that, but you can't expect to go to a law firm with an easy way. If you want to work for a law firm, you should work for a law firm. If you want to work in public interest, you should work in public interest. If you want to work in a law professor, you should do that. But when attorneys don't commit to a different practice setting, people in practice settings are not impressed. In academia, if you want to be a law professor, you have to start off there pretty quickly. It's okay sometimes to go to a law firm for a year or 2, or maybe a little bit longer sometimes, but not very long. You have to follow certain rules if you want to be an academic. You have to follow certain rules if you want to work in a law firm, because if you're not committed to a practice setting, then most employers aren't willing to take a chance on you. So you have to think about the decisions you're making and what you're doing once you leave a practice setting, or once you go into a practice setting, and which is very important. A lot of times, and this is even true of law student attorneys. So a lot of times a law student attorney, their first summer may work, I don't know, just do something unrelated to the practice of law. Maybe they travel or something, I don't know, but or maybe they work some government job or something. Then their second year of law school, they do the same thing. They don't work in a law firm. Maybe they volunteer or something. These attorneys almost never are hired while they're in law school for law firm jobs, because people are hired that look like they're trying to get experience in law firms during the summer, work in law firms during the summer, not the opposite. And it's very widely known that people that go to Yale Law School work in a lot of different practice settings. Sometimes they start in law firms. Most often they'll start in public interest type governments and then roles. And then they'll think, I'm ready to go back to a law firm now after 10 years of experience doing anything but practicing law. And because I went to Yale Law School, I should be welcome into any of these law firms, and maybe even as a partner. Literally, this is what they say. And this is what their resumes and what they think their demands can be. I should be able to come back as a partner, even though I've never worked in a law firm, because I went to Yale Law School and I worked in public interest for 10 years because I went to Yale Law School, and it just doesn't work that way. Obviously, these people that come in with sort of entitlement issues and believe that the practice setting can change and that they can be, they no longer have to adhere to the idea that you have to learn and become a junior associate and a mid-level and senior, work your way up and show your commitment. They won't get hired. Any reasonable person in my situation, for example, could have realized that my wife's lack of commitment was toxic. Any person that had seen that, at least is probably 100% sure, not like that anymore, but when people are young, they make mistakes and are often different people. And if an attorney is looking to hire another attorney, they definitely need to find someone that's likely to commit and who hasn't not committed in the past. And this is how employers think. If they think you're not committed, and if you haven't committed in the past, they're just not going to be interested in you. And a lot of attorneys start their careers in law firms, and then their dream is to go in-house. And that's a problem too, because if you're constantly thinking about, imagine in a relationship, if you're in a relationship with someone and you're constantly thinking about being with another person, you're always going to never give it your all. You're always going to be reserved. You're never going to be fully committed, and you're always going to be looking for other opportunities. And this is how it is when an attorney's inside of a law firm and thinking that they want to be in another firm, or they want to go in-house, or they want to do something else. They're never fully committed. And because they're never fully committed, nothing ever goes the way it should. And when you're not committed, you're not able to impress the right people. You're not going out of your way to do a good job because you're already gone. And that's not good. Attorneys that join law firms with the idea that they want to go in-house after a year or two are already gone. They're never going to succeed. It's just never going to happen. And then the other things that's important to think about too is, I just bring this up because so many people dream of going in-house. The best in-house jobs and the attorneys that become general counsels of big corporations and things don't leave a law firm after 2 or 3 years. They leave a law firm after becoming a partner in a large law firm and getting a name for themselves in the legal profession. And that's why, that's how they get hired by Apple and things to be their general counsel. They don't get hired because they decided to go in-house as a 4th or 5th year attorney and work themselves up in the legal department. They get hired because they already have a name for themselves, and they made the hard choices, and they went through the obstacles to become an exceptional attorney before they went in-house. By the time they go in-house, they're getting these offers oftentimes as attorneys with very good pedigrees and roles in the legal profession, and very well thought of from big companies, because they're often doing work for those big companies and they're often their clients. There's just so much to this. It's the people that get the best jobs in legal departments are not people that think about going in-house as a 2nd or 3rd year attorney. They're people that make their way in the legal profession very far before they're offered those opportunities. It's the same thing with working in the government. If you want to work in a super high level of role in the government, you want to get appointed by the president to be something or something like that, you're not going to get that job generally if you're leaving the government. You can get judgeships and everything, but if you're leaving a law firm after a few years, you're going to get it after you become someone that's well known in the legal industry. And so the best opportunities come when you're able to persevere and where you commit to a practice setting, you commit to something, and then over time then those sorts of opportunities develop. So anytime you decide you're not committed to something, you're not committed to a practice setting, you're not committed to a practice area, it's going to hurt you. And it's not going to help you in the law run. You need to look like you're committed. And then another thing is your ability to stay with a single employer will also show your level of commitment. It's very rare to see. Employers want to see people that are able to stick with a single employer for a long period of time. It shows a lot, because what it shows is that you have character, meaning people are saying bad things about your employer, what it's like to work there. And that happens, by the way, even every employer, people have something negative to say about it that are working there. But you have an ability to just push through no matter what and not get influenced by negative information. You have the ability to do good work. So if you're staying with an employer for an extended period of time, that means that your work is probably pretty good, because otherwise they wouldn't keep you around. If you have the ability to stay with an employer for an extended period of time, that means that you have the ability to make different situations work. The law firm may go through ups and downs at different points, but you make that work. You don't quit and give up when there's resistance, because there's always going to be resistance in every law firm and place that you work. So your ability to not give up is massive. And this is the same thing that happened with my ex-wife. And again, I'm not saying I'm perfect, and there are reasons that she shouldn't have committed, because I'm not that stupid to believe that. But some people just don't commit. I remember after we divorced, and I met her, I don't know, 4 or 5 months after we divorced, and she told me she'd been on like 30 plus dates and something crazy like that, or maybe more. And then 2 years, she'd been in 7 or 8 serious relationships. So some people are just not at different points in time in the position to commit. So that way with people working in law firms and different employers, sometimes they kind of need to sow their wild oats and work at a lot of places before they're able to commit. But the sooner you can commit, the better off you're going to be. And it's just how it is. And so I review resumes of attorneys all day, every day, not at least a few hours every day. And I see people that have consistently, they switch positions almost every year, and they've been doing it for a decade or more. And it's crazy. Like, how did they get job number 9? How did they get job number 10? How did they get job number 11? And often they have this kind of mesmerizing type of skill where they go into an interview and they're able to convince people that this is the job for them, and they're finally going to stick around someplace. But what invariably ends up happening is that same attorney will end up leaving the next firm. And if you were an employer, you wouldn't want to hire those people. And it's just how it is. And again, when I've hired people that have been at their previous employer for a decade or more, they almost always stay the same like the time of me. It's just how it works. And if they were with their past employer for only a year or two, the same thing happens with me as well. They stay a year or two. It's almost how it works. If someone's has a time clock built into them that says, I leave an employer every year, what that means is they start their job enthusiastic and trying to do well. They typically will do that for 6 months or so. They'll try, but then they'll get frustrated when a few roadblocks and things aren't going perfectly well. And then they'll start looking for another job and disengaging. And then the employer will try to start getting angry at them, and there'll be tension. And then the person will eventually find another job and leave. And the best predictor of your future success with an employer is how long you stayed at your previous job and the one before that. Attorneys come to us all the time looking for jobs. And I many times, a large percentage of the time, will tell them that maybe you should stay where you're at for a while. And because it just doesn't look like you're committed. And this is what employers will pick up. And when you're moving a lot, it can suggest a lot of things. It can suggest that the employers don't like your work. That the employers are pushing you along because they're not giving you work, and you believe you need to find someplace because of the quality of work you do, or because of your interpersonal relationships and how well you get along with people, or many times because of your self-esteem, like you don't have the ability to take criticism. Sometimes people in employment situations will get criticized, and the second they get criticized, they will believe that they need to start looking for another job, which is crazy. Like they have no self-esteem. They're unwilling to accept feedback. And the second they get feedback, they end up leaving. And this is very common, by the way. I see this in our company from time to time, where someone gets criticized for their work, and all of a sudden they just can't take it. And they sometimes will walk off the job that day. That's just not how it should work. So I remember I was speaking to a woman not too long ago that had about 7 jobs or maybe more in the last 10 years. And when I asked her about it, she kept saying that she'd been headhunted away from each position. And this is the reason that she had all these moves. So every job she had been apparently headhunted away, and so had all these moves. And I didn't understand this for a while. I was like, why would somebody be proud of something like this? Why would somebody be proud of that someone else wanted them when an employer had already committed to them, was paying them good money? And why would somebody be proud of something like this? And a lot of times people are excited about new jobs and interviewing and having their worth affirmed when they're hired, and going somewhere and having a fresh slate. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with getting a fresh slate. I'm not saying that getting a new job can't be exciting. I'm not saying that interviewing with a firm and having people to ask you questions about yourself and trying to learn about you isn't a good thing. And I'm not saying it doesn't make people feel good to get offers. But you shouldn't really be doing this very often, because the more often you do this, the more it's going to look like you can't commit. If you look to your existing employer, like where you're working now, like you can't commit, then that employer is going to believe, because of your actions you've taken in the past, that you're not going to commit again. And so they will not give you the most important work. They will be very hesitant to advance you when other people in your law firm have been committed. They will not think of you first when it comes time to make decisions if you're less committed than some others. So it's just things to think about. And the problem is when you leave a job, there's a period before you leave, often while you're out on interviews or when you start sending your resume out, and where you stop fully applying yourself because you realize you're not going to be there. And that doesn't serve the employer well. So an employer that hires you after you've been at several jobs should think, and they don't always, but they should realize that there's going to come a time after a short period of time where you're not going to be fully committed to them anymore, and where you're going to be thinking about leaving. And it is going to result in reduced productivity and not as good of work for the employer. And I've noticed in my career, it's actually very interesting, and I talk about this in a lot of the webinars, but people that typically start their jobs in smaller markets they often do not move firms very often. They will often start at a firm right after they graduate from law school, or maybe their second firm, or I don't know, where they get a job after they pass the bar. And in the smaller markets, a lot of times, more than 50% of the time, attorneys that start out at firms often are at those firms their entire careers. Meaning, if you start your career at a market of 25,000 people or something, and only a couple of law firms, you will often stay at that law firm your entire career because there's not a lot of options in your environment. And so settling down and committing seems like the best thing to do. So in smaller markets, that's what a lot of times people do. They join a law firm and that's where they are. They're not going to jump around. They're not looking at all these options. And maybe the case that they don't have the same ambitions as people who are in the most competitive environments. I don't know, but I think that people are in smaller markets are more likely to commit because they don't have a choice. They can't. There's not a lot of options for them to do other things, so they commit. And it's like this in relationships. I noticed that a lot of times people that live in smaller towns and are in different areas of the country where there's different values are more likely to commit and stay married than those that are. I don't know exactly why that is, but I think it's the presence of options. And so that's very important, this whole idea of committing and putting yourself in situations where you can commit and understanding that your success in a law firm or pretty much any legal environment is going to be due to your ability to commit. And then there's also, of course, this argument that I like to call the sunk cost argument for being unhappy and staying unhappy with an employer. One reason I think that I stayed in a bad relationship and then a marriage for so long is because I believed that there was this long history together, all these shared experiences, and that was something that I needed to honor. And of course, in every long-term relationship, there's good times and shared memories. And these shared memories and experiences help us to stay together. And we often will ask ourselves, why should we give up on someone who knows so much about us and with whom we share so much and have shared so much in the past? And in the employment realm, there's also something called political capital. Many times, the longer you've worked somewhere and the more people you've helped working there, the more positive relationships you have, the worse off you often believe that you would be leaving the employer. And of course, there's some truth to this, but the fact that you've had a history with a certain employer, I believe is not always a reason to remain there and then also remain with with one person. It's very common for attorneys to contact me. We've been at a certain firm for decades in many cases, and they may have been at that firm for 15 years and out of law school, and they're still associates. Very common with attorneys that join very big, prestigious law firms. Often the firm will keep them on as an associate. I've seen people be associates for 20 plus years in big law firms. And so when they want to move, there's a risk. The law firm where they're still an associate, or by the way, there are people in giant law firms that are associates that have been associates for 20 years that do very well financially. I've seen some making over $500,000 a year, and the law firm has shown that they won't get rid of them and are willing to keep them around. When that same attorney starts going out on the market, they realize that no one's going to pay them as much, so they might as well be associates forever. But you just need to, they need to understand that these sunk costs that are helping them, and they may have people protecting them in the firm. And while they may have hit a glass ceiling, will have all this political capital many times inside of law firms that you might lose if you go into a new law firm. Because if you go somewhere else, you're suddenly starting from ground zero and you don't have people protecting you, and you don't have reasons for the law firm to keep you there. And so this sunk cost may not exist in a new employer. And so there's a lot of risk when you move on to something else. And a lot of instances when attorneys will go to a new firm, after being a decade or more at the previous firm, they'll lose that capital. And it becomes more difficult for them to keep their jobs in new employers. And so they'll often leave a short time later. This instance, by the way, is very common. So you may be at a law firm or a certain legal environment. You may have been there for 5 years or 6 years and had people that were protecting you and giving you the best type of work. And there was a lot of safety there. And all of a sudden you leave and you go to another law firm and things just go south very quickly and you don't know what happened. It's even more common, by the way, when attorneys go in-house. So there's this kind of phenomenon that happens. It's very common where an attorney will leave a law firm and go in-house, and they will think that as part of their job, it's to tell everyone what they're doing is wrong, is illegal, or that shouldn't be done, is risky, and they'll run it all the way up the chain to the CEO and everything, not realizing that a lot of times what in-house employers want is people that tell them how they can do things, how they can get away with it, and not shooting them down, but they will shoot people down. They'll make threats that it's malpractice if they do things a certain way, and then they often get fired very quickly. So they actually give the in-house employer the exact opposite of what they want. So this sort of stuff can happen in any environment when you move, but it's not always the case that it can happen. And you may believe that you're not leaving, you can't leave a certain employment situation, and that the relationship you built up and the political power and so forth is not worth leaving. But many times the best thing you possibly can do is move if you're unhappy and unfulfilled and feel like you're not valued. If you're in a bad relationship where you're constantly unhappy and fighting every day, if you're in a bad legal position where you're constantly unhappy and it's all you can do to go to work each day and you're depressed and you don't like it and it makes you unhappy, it's just the last thing you should be doing. There's no use in continuing. And even if you have a sunk cost in it, there's no use in continuing because it takes your soul away. It's just not smart for you to do. And if you don't have any reason to stay in your job and you don't like, and you're unhappy and it's not likely to improve, then you definitely should get out of it. I should have gotten out of this bad relationship before I did. And you should always leave something if you're not improving. You should always, frankly, get out of certain types of relationships if you're unhappy and nothing is progressing. It's just not in your best interest. You can some people stay in abusive and unsatisfactory relationships that never improve. I watch sometimes, I haven't done it in probably 15 years, but I always thought it was funny. I had this girlfriend that we used to watch these Lifetime videos or movies and stuff with, and it was very funny, but there's a lot of them about these people that are in these battered roles where they're being abused in relationships and they just keep going back and back expecting something different. And you're not going to get anything different if you keep coming back to an unhappy employment situation. And when you're in a bad relationship, your partner is going to continually remind you of the mistakes you made and what's wrong with you and all that. And that's not healthy. It's the same thing with an employer. The employer is going to remind you of the things that you may have done poorly. And they're going to be pigeonholed into some certain roles that may not be in your best interest. I remember there was when I was at this Dewey Ballantyne firm, there was this associate that was like, I don't know, the 15, 20-year associate. And he was from the New York office and he went back and forth. And he was considered like this fool, like that everyone could kind of abuse. And it was just, it's just not the role he should have been in. I don't know why he would want to be in that role and why it would have made him happy. And the same thing with bad employment situations. You don't need to stay in a bad employment situation. The employer sees good in you, but also a lot of bad. That's not going to benefit you. And if they don't think positively of you, then that's going to affect your happiness. And if their view is not going to change. Sometimes what happens is attorneys go into their first law firms and they will make all these mistakes, but they'll learn from them, but they'll still have problems with their brand. They'll have problems with their brand with a law firm. So the only thing that they can possibly do is to go to another law firm and not make those same mistakes in the future and be seen as someone that does a very good job. I remember I was clerking for this federal judge, and early on, I made some typos. I didn't think they were that serious, but a few typos, on 3 or 4 typos in a series of memos and opinions and things. And so I got the reputation, or he reminded me that you have made typos. You need to be very careful. Typos are a very bad thing. And he thought they were a bad thing because that opposing counsel, or you write an opinion and they see typos, or you're submitting something for publication, an opinion, and there's typos, that makes the judge look bad. So he did not like typos. So I became very aggressive about making sure I made no typos and did. And when I got into a law firm environment, I remembered all that training and how important it was not to make typos. And I did everything I could not to make typos. And that helped me. And I got the exact opposite reputation as someone that didn't make typos and wrote very cleanly and didn't make mistakes. But if you have a bad reputation for something and you don't think you're going to shake it, then it doesn't make sense for you often to stay in that employment situation. And it's the same thing of a bad marriage or relationship. You're always going to have resentment. So when I got in this relationship, I was, as time went by, I was resentful for the things that happened while I was in law school. I was resentful for the things that happened when I got out of law school. I was always resentful. And that doesn't do you any good. If you can't trust someone, you can't trust someone. And especially if something happens multiple times. So another thing that happens to people, and this is one of the final ones, and then we'll do questions, is that you often will stay in bad situations because you don't realize just how marketable you are. Many times attorneys, when they're in law school, don't believe that they don't have a lot of opportunities presenting themselves. They believe it's because of where they went to law school or other issues with them. But a few years out of law school, you're suddenly versed in a single practice area and you know what you're doing, and you have more confidence, and you have a practice area where maybe if 20,000 attorneys or maybe 1,500 attorneys are coming out to practice law in your state every year, or 500 attorneys, there's only 5 attorneys with your expertise all of a sudden. So you become suddenly much more marketable. And so people believe that oftentimes if they had a difficult time finding a position in the past, it's always going to be this way. Certain practice areas rise and fall depending on the state of the economy. Real estate often does better when there's low interest rate environments. Corporate law does better when the economy is expanding. But you may often believe that you're marketable or not marketable just because of what's happened in the past. Different geographic areas go through ups and downs in terms of their marketability. Different things can happen at different times. And so you often don't understand your marketability. I talk to attorneys all the time that have no idea of how marketable they are. And they often believe that they need to settle. They need to settle for some type of job, or they need to settle for working in some sort of market, or they need to settle for being pigeonholed into a certain type of location or practice area, practice setting. And both my ex-wife and I were very marketable individuals, meaning at least on this dating market. Once we became apart, we had absolutely no issues meeting new people. And maybe we didn't realize how marketable we are. I don't know, but how we could be much, much happier apart, like we were oil and water, how much happier we could be when apart. And I probably stayed with it because I hadn't had any understanding of my marketability. And maybe I believed that I deserved this because of things that I was being told were wrong with me. And then the same thing in bad relationships, that people that stay in bad situations, they often don't believe that they can do any better. So a lot of people in bad employment situations think this is all they're capable of, and that they deserve bad treatment, and this is the best they can do. And the employer will often give them that idea. And you may not realize your marketability and what makes you unique. And you may not realize that you have skills and other attributes that make you very unique that other people will appreciate. I see things all the time where someone might be practicing in a small market and think that's the best they can do, but not realizing that they've gotten this experience. It's very rare, and there's just special things about them. And then all of a sudden, they're interviewing with firms in New York City that pay 5 times what they're making and things. And so everyone has different skills that make them unique. And if you're in a bad employment situation, or you may believe that you're lucky to have a job, or you're lucky to have this other part of it. No one else is ever going to love you, or no one else is ever going to see this stuff in you. You may be criticized and marginalized and put down and treated poorly and believe you can't do better. And then you may question your self-worth and how desirable you are to others. And you believe that you can't do any better, that you're where you should be. And this isn't always true. Most attorneys, if you're in a bad situation and you're treated poorly and you don't think you can do better, you can definitely find a better job. And I'm happy to tell you how. You ask questions, but anybody can definitely find a better job if you're in a bad situation and you feel like you need to stay there, because every attorney is marketable. You may not be marketable where you're working because the market may be too small, but you are probably marketable in other geographic regions. If you're in a large market and there's too many people like you may be marketable in smaller geographic regions. And the only thing to happen when you're trying to market yourself is to be ready for rejection and prepared to deal with this, which shouldn't be a problem. There's a lot of rejection out there. Not everyone is going to be interested in you. And that's fine. You don't need to worry about that. I remember I was in Turkey. This is a long time ago when I was very young. And I made friends with this cook. Who was this Greek cook, and he never had any problem meeting girls. And I remember one afternoon, my girlfriend and I were spending some time with him, and he told us that he wanted to go out on a date that night. And in the space of an hour, he walked up to at least 4 or 5 tourists on the street in front of a cafe we were sitting, spoke with them and chatted them each up and asked each one out. And most said no, but one said yes. And he ended up in a relationship with her. And he wrote me, but this is before the days of email and things, but wrote me a letter with a picture of them showing that they were still together. And so a lot of times people that are not afraid to get rejected could meet more people and be happy. And it's the same thing, by the way, that with jobs, but this particular cook, he knew he could always meet people. And I was impressed with this. And you need to think the same thing with jobs. What's so frightening to me, many attorneys, BCG in particular, we try to get people to look at lots of different firms and to apply to lots of different places. And what most often happens is people get overwhelmed and they're like, why should I apply to so many places? That's dangerous. Like, what will anyone think of me if I apply to all these places? Not realizing, by the way, is if you post your profile on a dating site, which a lot of people these days do, you may be seen by 25 or 30,000 people as they're trying to find matches for you. Essentially, you're putting out 25 or 30,000 applications, but when you're looking for a law firm job, you may only be looking at a few. You might look at less than 20 or less than 30 or less than 50. And you need to really meet a lot of people many times before and expose yourself to a lot of people to understand your marketability, because almost everyone is marketable. Every attorney is marketable to someone. You just need to find the right thing. And then this is just another one with people staying put when something doesn't work. A lot of times people feel comfortable allowing others to control what they think, what is acceptable for them emotionally and financially. A lot of us are very eager to give power to others. We want to trust others. We want to feel that others will take care of us. And in many cases, this may come from the need for parenting or love that you didn't get when you're younger. I don't know why it is, but many times people do not want to have control over their lives and careers. They want someone else to control it and someone else to assume responsibility for the condition of our lives and our jobs, because it's easier for us to give responsibility to others. But it's really never easy to give responsibility to others for what's happening to you. You need to understand also and always that you are responsible, because if you give others responsibility, you're going to get what they choose for you and not otherwise. And so in my case, I spent a long time feeling badly about myself, somewhat depressed. And the best thing I've ever could have possibly done for myself, which would have been to end the relationship and move on, but I didn't. I was always ready to complain and feel badly for myself and talk about what was wrong in my marriage with others. And I wanted things to work out. But that obviously never would have happened. So people do this with their careers. They spend years, this is very common, they spend years complaining about their jobs, feeling sorry about themselves because of the hours, feeling sorry for themselves because there's no opportunity they believe where they're at, feeling sorry for themselves because they don't like the work, feeling sorry for themselves about the people, not liking the people they work with, or their bosses, their superiors, and they just don't fix any of it. This is what happens. And they often want to believe that things will get better and their employer will look out for their best interests if only the person would commit, give it their all, but it just doesn't work. It just may never work. And so this is what happens. And so if something doesn't work for you, you have the ability to take back your power and fix it. And you can set limits for what you expect from the person you're dealing with or leave. This is what a lot of people do. They have limits. They refuse to be treated in a certain way. They refuse to accept certain types of behaviors from others. And if that happens, they leave. And you can do the same thing with your employers. If you find yourself in a position where you're unhappy and not treated well, you have the ability to take back your power. And that's something that you should do. If you do not feel treated well, you need to take back your power. And you need to do the same thing in your relationships, in your jobs. And you need to look out for yourself. It's very important. And no matter who you're dealing with, most employers or people will prioritize their self-interest over your own. And so you have to take back your power and you have to accept responsibility for the position you're in your relationships. And if you're not getting good results, then you may be doing something wrong and need to fix it. And the same thing with your jobs. You just need to realize why you're unhappy. This is the end of this particular topic in the webinar, but I just really want to point out that every day I see people that have spent years and decades and being unhappy in their jobs and believe that something's going to change for the better, and things do not change. Most legal jobs are very similar. Relationships are too, for the most part. Once you're involved with someone, there's always a honeymoon period where things go very well, but then it takes work on both sides. Most relationships do not work out, but if you commit to them and do the best you can, they will. And so people leave jobs and they stay in situations don't always work for them, and they make the mistake in their careers as well about how they approach things. You just need to understand that you can't make these kind of decisions on the same ones that I did. Relationships, you have to understand that a lot of this is going to have to do with your success and whether or not there's no success. I will take a quick break just for a minute or two, and then when I come back, we can do questions. Typically, I will stay as long as people have questions. You can ask questions about pretty much anything covered in today's webinar, or any questions you have about anything related to your career. I will be back in just a second, and then when I come back, we'll take questions. I did want to say just that I think that this particular type of knowledge about sticking with your career, when to stick with it, when not to stick with it, committing and all these sorts of things are really the cornerstone of everything that I try to teach, because a lot of people do find themselves stuck in very unhappy relationships, very unhappy jobs, things they don't know why they're not advancing because they're just moving around too much and not committing to something. And so all these points are very important. And I commend everyone because I know this is a fairly long presentation, for listening to this and absorbing this, because this stuff can change you. It can just learning how to commit, or learning when to leave, or learning not to settle, or learning to apply to more places. All these are just hugely important tasks. Just one could change your career. One that changes people's career all the time are the people that allow themselves to apply to as many places as possible to find the right match. That changes careers. People that commit to one practice area changes careers. Very few people understand the importance of committing to a practice area. People that are able to commit to an employer where others aren't changes careers. Like, all these things can change your career. People that refuse to stay in roles where they're unhappy and treated poorly changes careers. So there's so many things that came out of today's presentation. I hope you understand. And I tried to relate these to personal relationships, because it's everyone has their own story. I could have written about it with law firms and things, but I hopefully what I talked about today was a little bit more interesting and you can identify with it. And like I said, this is a special treat because I'm not even sure this is something that ever supposed to have been published. So I'll be back in just 1 minute. And then when I come back, we will take questions. So thank you. All right. So we are going to do questions. Just give me 1 second. I'll pull up the screen for that. And then again, these questions can be about literally anything to do with your career. Sometimes I did just want to bring up that the very best questions are ones that you're afraid to ask. So a lot of times people will feel as if they shouldn't ask a certain type of question for whatever reason, and because it's too personal. But in many cases, those are actually the most valuable questions for people to ask. Okay. And it doesn't look like we have, let me see. Oh, by the way, when you ask questions on these webinars, I will not show your name. So it looks like this first question, someone shouldn't show their name, but I'm not showing it. I have been listening to your webinars, value, and sometimes are frustrated by them. Can say the messages have struck my mind. Had another interview today and think these help my mindset. Maybe along with some luck was the best interview I'd had in a while. It's not my dream job. Law never was, but I appreciate the idea of commitment. Today is a great respite from the straight bad news about past decisions and actions. Appreciate your openness and dedication. Less of a question, more feedback. Okay, yeah. So one of the things just that you're saying in this is about that something is not your dream job, but can appreciate the idea of a commitment. I think a lot of people watching this, the law may not necessarily be their dream job, meaning it's not something that no longer appeals to you. It's not something that is fun for you. It's not something that you can see yourself doing or appreciating. And it may not even be something that you can think of yourself doing that. And I'll tell you a couple quick stories because it's very interesting. Like when you have an idea of what you want, it doesn't really matter how much education you have. It doesn't matter none of that stuff matters. It's very interesting. I grew up pretty close to in Malibu, literally with a stone, but maybe I don't know, slingshots of Cindy Crawford and her husband's house. And they had a child named Kaya Gerber who was in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, maybe today's printed, but yesterday online with a whole spread about her. I remember just 5 years ago seeing her at the Four Seasons Hotel in Westlake Village, where she was going to a prom or something for the Malibu High School. And she actually dropped out of there and then went and was homeschooled and now is a famous model and has this book club and never went to college or anything like that. And but and that's someone that knows what she wants and has become very successful with the tools at her disposal. And there's so many stories like that about athletes, about all these people that have very successful lives. But in almost all cases, they know what they want. I was having dinner last night, my fiance and myself, with a famous photographer that I went out to dinner with. And she had gone to high school locally and then had gone to a local school for college. Isn't that great? And believed that, and now has become a very famous photographer who has pictures in all of these magazines and is very sought out around the world for her work. And she's very young. She's 25 or 26. And she became a famous photographer based on a belief that she is on this earth to capture the beauty of God's creatures or people and to bring that out in their pictures. And this is something she very much believes in. She very much believes in that's her role in the world. And so not doing anything to do with taking jobs in corporations or working for other people. She just started down this road of trying to take pictures in that way and bringing that intention to the pictures she takes. And so everyone, and Kaya Gerber, like someone who's a model, but also has a book club, is a voracious reader. And these things are just very interesting when someone tries to put themselves into a position where they love what they do and where they're committed to it. When I first came across legal recruiters, when I was looking for a job, I discovered how much I liked this industry and how much there was to teach people and how there was no one else out there that was interested in helping to understand their value and what a good use of my time and energy this was. So all these sorts of things are very powerful, and they when you do in what you love, it can help you. Now, certainly in my profession, there's ups and downs, but on a daily basis, I've always been committed to it. I know what I want to do. And if you're not committed to practicing law and it's not what you want to do, I don't know for anyone that unless you can find your passion for it, it's going to make a difference. You have to fall in love with what you're doing, no matter what it is. And that has to drive you. And you have to be committed, because if you're not committed and you don't want to do it and it makes you unhappy, then it's just going to lead to more bad stuff. I remember and I've told the story before, and for those of you that have been on this call, but I remember I was in law school and I was taking this class. It was very funny. It was led by a teacher, a professor he was an associate professor, and he had 2 years to make tenure or something like that. And he was teaching this class. It was called Technology in the Information Age or something like that. And this was a long time ago. This was the 1990s, before the internet had really, people even really knew what it was. It wasn't really something that was out there. And he had this class where he was making all these predictions that the internet would come along, that people would be working from home, that all these people would do all their work online and the companies would go online. And this is before anybody believed anything like that was possible. And Amazon had just barely started. And this is what the guy was thinking, and he was writing about and teaching about, and everyone thought he was crazy, including most of the people in the class. And then, of course, the professors at the law school that ended up not giving him tenure. But what was interesting about him is that I was in this class and I was taking this class, and I think on my first paper, I got A/A minus, and it was the only A in his class. And there might've been like 24, 25 people in there. And so I was trying very hard to do well, and I would go to his office hours and talk to him and stuff. And so at one point he said something like, what are you doing here? And I was like, what do you mean, what am I doing here? And he goes, it's obvious you don't belong in law school. Like, why are you in law school? And I said, I can't even understand how you're saying this to me. I'm on law review. I'm getting the best grade in your class. I have this clerkship coming up. And he said, no, this is not like what you should be doing. And I know it. And I was like, how can you, what are you talking about? And then his office overlooked the law library at the school. And he pointed down, and you could see like all these people very seriously over books and things, and just really serious middle of the afternoon. Not a time that I ever studied. I was always study at night, and they were just very serious, huddled over their books. And I looked at that, and he said, well, you're just not like these people. They're concerned about trying to help other people solve their problems and their legal problems. And that's something they're going to take great pride in. And these people should be attorneys, and that's just not who you are. I was mad. I think at one point I told another teacher that this person had said that to me, and they said, that's not very nice of him. But at the same time, he was right. And he was very fortuitous. Just as he saw this stuff with technology taking over and everyone working on the internet, he also saw that. The point is that certain people should be practicing law and certain people shouldn't. If you're not getting the type of reception you want from the market, it may be because there's a lot of stuff you need to change. Maybe you need to change your interviewing. Maybe you need to, which you should review my interview webinar. Maybe you need to change your resume. Maybe you need to change your cover letter. Maybe you need to change your behavior in interviews. Maybe you need to change your focus. Maybe you need to change the practice areas that you're going after. There's so much information about what you should be doing. Certain people will say, I want to be a corporate attorney, when there's just no corporate jobs where they're trying to get a job. Certain people will say, I want to go into IP, when maybe they don't have a technical background that makes them suitable for that. Or maybe they'll be suitable for trademark law, but that's it. Certain people will go into do different things where they shouldn't. Certain people will believe that they deserve to work at a huge law firm in Los Angeles or some very competitive city. So you have to do what comes naturally to you and where things open up. I say this on every webinar, that the most successful attorneys that I run into are often personal injury attorneys, or people in practice areas where they're serving people, where they went to school and weren't necessarily very good students and didn't go to the best law schools, but they found themselves in the right practice setting. So you need to be in the right practice setting. You need to be working with the right people. And often your skill set is not going to be practicing law. It doesn't have to be that for all people. There's a lot of, I saw, I don't know, article or something once about all these attorneys that had failed the bar exam in New York and in California had never passed the bar exam. And then all the great things that happened to these people, they became partners, and I'm not partners, but they became these business people that started these huge companies and had all the wealth in the world. And I remember one of my neighbors, this guy, he started this credit card company. He went to Whittier Law School, didn't do very well there. I don't even know if he managed to pass the bar. He went to work at the first firm I think he got a job at and didn't pass the bar the first time. They didn't pass it the second time, and then went to work selling credit cards on the phone to people, and then eventually started his own credit card company and sold it for, I don't know, some incredible amount of money, like $50 or $60 million to Intuit, and then started another one and just became incredibly successful. And he found himself in a career that he was much more successful at than had he continued practicing law. So many times you have to put yourself in a different situation, because you may never be appreciated practicing law if you're in the wrong situation. It's just how it works. And so you really need to make sure that you're in the right situation? This is a good question, and I think it's a good question. But the final part of the question that you didn't ask that I wanted to answer is the idea of when you talk about commitment, you do have to be committed to something in order to succeed. So you're not going to succeed if you're not committed to being the best attorney you can be. You're just not going to succeed. You're not going to succeed if you're unable to if you're not interested in practicing law. Because if you commit to something, you suddenly see all the opportunities there are, and you have faith, and then you're able to overcome obstacles. One book that I recommend, I was actually talking to this famous photographer about it last night, and she was telling me she read it. And so all these people that have become very successful read books like this. This is a Think and Grow Rich book. And it talks about the idea of things like persistence, being able to have persistence and having desire to achieve a goal, programming your mind for achievement as opposed to for achievement, being all these sorts of things it talks about, which is it calls auto-suggestion. All these people you surround yourself with, meaning the people that you get, are they positive or are they negative? What type of people they are. And so all the most successful people do these things. They learn how to desire to be the best attorney they possibly can. They learn how to persist in the face of issues. Many times you don't become successful until you overcome all these challenges and bad things that have happened to you. And you only overcome those things when you desire something. And somehow it's God or whatever the forces of the universe will align and help someone that has persistence. And then you have to talk to yourself in a positive way. So if you want to do these things, you need to study manuals and things about how to be successful and what happens. I've written hundreds of articles about what I've learned from talking. It's on this old blog of mine called harrisonlawrence.com. But I'm certainly not saying that I'm the expert in all things self-improvement, because I'm not. But I think that you owe it to yourself to really understand as much as you can about self-improvement and how you run your mind, because how you run your mind has more to do with your success than anything else. If you run your mind in the correct way, then good things are going to happen to you. And if you don't run your mind in the right way, then bad things will happen to you. The difference between someone who's in prison, for example, and the average person, most of the time, is just how the person in prison is running their mind. They're not thinking the thoughts they need to be successful. They're not doing the things that they need to be successful. They're allowing negative thoughts to enter their mind. They don't have persistence to do things the right way. They want to cut corners. They program their mind for the opposite of achievement. As an attorney, I sometimes feel trapped in the cycle of toxic work environments, mirroring past relationships. How can I recognize these patterns sooner and make healthier choices? A lot of environments are toxic. There's a lot of reasons that work environments are toxic. They can be toxic because of the people. They can be toxic because of the structure, like how people are paid. They can be toxic because of the practice area. So some practice areas can be toxic. They can be toxic because of the quality of the quality of clients, the quality of clients, type of clients. There's all sorts of reasons that a work environment can be toxic. So many people, for example, find law firms toxic. Other people find working for companies toxic. So working for a company, for example, why would working for a company as in-house counsel, house counsel, how could that potentially be toxic? New CEOs typically mean new legal departments. So that's just legal departments. So it means you could lose your job. New GCs typically meaning new legal department forced out with new GC, right? So if a new CEO comes in, they'll create a new legal department, meaning, and so you will lose your job if you're not a GC, lose position. So that's one way. Then other things that can happen in an in-house legal environment would be economic slowdown, legal department cost center, cut equals cost center, and people lose jobs. Then you have things that happen, for example, not just an economic slowdown, but a legal problem with company. People in legal department lose jobs, and legal department lose jobs. all these sorts of things, legal department, which, and you have mergers, and all sorts of things that happen. And then this same thing, people lose jobs, culture changes, all these sorts of things. So just think of all the companies that, regardless of the company, it could be like things that have gone have been bankrupt, like WeWork, or what's happened to places like Tesla and Apple. Different companies go through different iterations. And so that can be toxic. Working for the government, it can be toxic. So you have things that would happen if you're working with the government, where you have Democrat, if you're one party, Democrat or Republican in power. So that can create toxicity. So there's all sorts, every legal environment, every type of possible legal environment that you could be in is going to have toxicity associated with it. And there's nothing you can do. The only thing you can change, you can't change someone that works for a company, can't change the toxicity of the environment. The only thing that they can change is themselves. Someone that works for the government can't change how an environment becomes more or less toxic. The only thing they can change is themselves. And the only thing that you can change with yourself is in terms of how you interact with that environment. What makes you happy? What makes you unhappy? Like, how do you get along in a given legal environment? Understanding what you can change and what you can't change is, and this is a little off topic, but that is important, is many people think that they can change their environments. They think they can change the people around them and make things less toxic, and you never can. So sometimes if you realize that you can't do those things and you don't spend your time thinking about these things, and you just turn it over to whatever you imagine something like God would be, like something that has more control over than you, that it enables humans to take form with all their cells and bones. And if you turn something over to that, you're going to be a lot happier than if you just try to control everything. Okay, so this person asked this question. I'll just answer this real briefly. And again, the more questions people have, I'm happy to answer everyone that you have, and I hope my answers are sufficient, for what your questions are. So, what if my resume is general civil litigation and patent law? So this is a good question. So sometimes people will be patent prosecution plus litigation. So that's actually okay, but it would be better if it was IP litigation. If that's what you're doing, that's okay, because patent attorneys very often, their early career will be patent prosecution. And then as they get more senior, then they do later career, they will do litigation. So that patent litigation more with some prosecution. So something or some or no. So that is just how to understand that. But yes, you can do both patent prosecution, litigation if you're doing, especially if you want to do IP litigation. But one thing I would caution you with patent prosecution is there are so many different types of patent law. You have hard sciences, and then within hard sciences, you have computer science and mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and physics, and all these different computer science, all these different subspecialties. And so with patent prosecutors, you're better off being much more specialized than non-specialized. Non-specialized patent prosecutor would be someone who did patents in biology, and then did patents in electrical engineering, then did patents in chemistry. Like that would be not specialized. So every attorney, regardless of what it is, you're better off being specialized. In litigation, you're much better off being an IP litigator than an IP litigator or a commercial litigator, or being a trademark litigator than a commercial litigator. The more specialized you can be, more specialized you can be, the more marketable you typically are in the long. As a seasoned attorney, I've noticed that my dedication to my legal career sometimes overshadows my efforts in maintaining healthy relationships. How can I ensure that I'm not taking my partner for granted while navigating the demanding nature of my profession? Are there specific actions or habits I can adopt this is actually a good question, to continually prioritize habits I can consistently prioritize my relationship without sacrificing my professional goals? I've encountered instances where work pressures have strained my personal connections. How can I strike a better connection balance between career success and nurturing my romantic life? Okay, so this is a really good question. And the reason this is a good question is because when I remember being at my first firm, and I'm not going to say what it is, but most attorneys at my first firm were divorced, and then second firm majority of attorneys divorced. Yeah, so there's a lot of truth to this point. It becomes very difficult for people to maintain, and there's two answers for this. Maybe it's difficult to maintain a good relationships when you're an attorney, or maybe there's predispositions that attorneys have that make them difficult partners. But the problem is when an attorney is working in a law firm, especially when they're young, 100% of their priority needs to often go into the practice of law because they're competing with other people that are doing the same. Often being married at that point in your career is something where your attention is going to be elsewhere, and where the person that you're with isn't going to feel cared about. And where when you do come home, you're going to put more emphasis on relaxing and taking it easy and not being tired and all those sorts of things. And where you actually may be in a bad mood and then feeling like you need to get back to work, and you become this person that is unrecognizable from someone married or not married, but also just in a healthy relationship with someone else. And people want to be in relationships with people that take time with them. Now, again, I'm not any stretch of the imagination, which you should have picked up by my topic of this webinar, which was about events from over 20 years ago. But the same thing is accurate, that if you're going to prioritize your work life over your personal life, then that's going to have consequences. It's going to have consequences for your children. I remember growing up, some of the kids with the most serious problems were kids who had whose parents were attorneys and never spent time with them. Or in another case, a very successful doctor I can think of. So sometimes being in professions where there's a lot of demands on your time are very difficult. Other times where you have to put yourself in a situation where you're going to be happy and not unhappy. This is how it works. So how do you keep a good relationship going? So there's certain things that I think that if you go to marriage counselors and things, and I know some, what is a marriage counselor? What does a marriage counselor say? And how do you, or a counselor or a relationship counselor, what do they tell you to do if you're in a committed relationship? Again, I'm not an expert on this sort of stuff, but I can tell you the things that I've heard that have worked in the past. The first one is nightly check-ins. You basically each side, and again, I'm not an expert. I just want to be very clear. If someone, ex-wife or telling you this, they would probably fall over in their chair laughing or pass out. But these are the things that you're supposed to do that I found that a lot of the most successful marriage therapists and stuff will tell you, or relationship over and over again. So you do what's called 15 minutes, where each person tells the other person for 15 minutes what they did that day for 15 minutes. So you can do that over the phone or whatever, but being able to connect and tell people what you did each day. Then the other big one, and I remember this just from two professional coaches that I've had, always stressed that they told me that I should do this. I remember with date night. So once a week, preferably during the week, people do something together, go out together, something like that. And then the other is if you just shared interest, which could be things like church, do whatever, sports, things like that. These are some of the things you can do, but honestly, what most people do that are attorneys is because of the pressure of cases and the pressure of expecting to bill hours and things, that a lot of this stuff doesn't happen. And because it doesn't happen, people aren't happy. A lot of times they want to blow off steam. I remember people that I knew when I was practicing law, and also myself to some degree, your ways of, not to some degree, but to the fact when your ways of finding connection become, because you don't have the time to do it. So you go out and you drink and things like that to get that connection. And that is obviously something that doesn't work. How do you do that? You have to take a choice. Is having a great legal career more important than having a healthy relationship, or is being in a career where you can be happy and have time for both important? One of the things that struck me, and this is just a point that I'll make that I think is important, in different parts of the country. So you could be working in Los Angeles and move to a smaller market, Bakersfield, California, or Fresno or something, or you could be in New York City and you could move to a smaller market, like maybe in upstate New York, like Syracuse or Rochester or something like that. Or you could be working at a large law firm in Dallas and move to a smaller market like San Antonio or something along those lines. So all of these types of markets are places where you potentially could move and things you could do if you wanted to when you're practicing law. But what happens is when people sometimes get out of larger markets and they move to smaller ones, they may find that the pay is much lower. So an attorney in New York City making $350,000 a year might move to Syracuse to a very good firm there, and they might make 50 or maybe less or maybe a little bit more. And they think, wow, why should I take such a pay cut? When you go to a market like that, you find that the attorneys live in houses probably much nicer than they would in New York City or the suburbs. They see their kids. They're home at a normal hour after work. They have better relationships with their wives and significant others, feel more security in their jobs because they're not expected to have these huge books of business and work so many hours. And they find that everything is just a lot better for them and they're happier. And so what I'm telling you is that sometimes you're going to be unhappy depending on the type of law firm you're in or the type of environment or what the demands are. There are some firms. I remember this woman attorney that was working for me, and she had been a partner at a smallish law firm in Los Angeles that had maybe 8 or 9 attorneys in it. And there was this one attorney that was one of the founders and named partners in the firm that absolutely weekends, if he was in the middle of a trial, he just wouldn't do it. He refused. And he would not work past 8 o'clock every night. He just refused to do it. He wouldn't do it. And he set the parameter of what he expected in his life, and he stuck to it. There was something about, I don't know where I read it, but Barack Obama, when he became president, said that he was going to have dinner with his family every night, just refused not to do it. That's what he was going to do. And so even though he's got this very important job, he did that. So you have to take care of yourself, and you have to take care of your mind, and you have to put yourself in a position where you're going to be happy. I just be completely upfront. I've seen so many attorneys just die at very young ages because they allowed all this stuff and these energies to freak them out and kill them, essentially, with heart attacks and cancer and just unexplained, just all these awful things. And so I don't know that it makes sense for you to put yourself in a situation where if you believe that all your relationships are suffering, if that's really what you want in the long term. I remember not too long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I first saw this partner that used to be I used to work for when I was in a law firm. And I saw him out, and when I met him, I remember he'd been in a pretty happy marriage, it looked like. And I just saw him sitting in this bar waiting for this date to show up, that it looked like it was a first date. And I just thought to myself how sad that was, that he had given himself so much to the legal career, but had been taking all that away. And then you just find that over and over again, that people's careers are often impacted negatively by putting more emphasis on the practice of law than on those relationships. And what's sad about that is that those relationships are often what make us the happiest and what give us the most spiritual connection. So it's too bad when that happens. And all right, this next question. Thanks for these questions too, by the way. These are very good questions. I rarely have such long answers to questions. So these are really good questions people are asking. And I'm glad that, by the way, that everyone who's asking these questions is able to have them at this webinar, because it was a long webinar and there was a lot of points made there, but I'm glad people understand the concept of commitment for one. I've noticed some pattern among colleagues who seem to struggle with commitment about their careers and personal lives. Could you delve deeper into why these parallels exist? Are there specific traits or experiences common among lawyers that might propose them to difficulties in commitment? Okay, so commitment, and I'll answer this the best I can, but I don't want to give you an answer that that is not beyond what I understand. In terms of commitment, I think that one of the most important things that lawyers have that quite often is they have the desire when get ahead, be their best, be the best, be seen as the best by others, take responsibility and ability for their success and to compare self to others. So this is, I think, one of the biggest characteristics. So if you were to take just your average priest or pastor in a church or something, I doubt you would find the same desire to win, to get ahead, to be the best professionally and I guess memberly and personally, or to be seen as the best by others, to take full advantage of responsibility. All these things you wouldn't see. You wouldn't see all those things. So this is just a characteristic of attorneys, that they tend to have this sort of thing. If you're on this call right now, there's always a lot of people that are always on this call and they say, my life is over because I'm a law student. I'm not getting jobs in huge law firms right now. I didn't go to a good enough law school. I heard a guy say the other day, I couldn't believe it. I was talking to a former professional athlete that was quite a household name, but definitely a household name in the city where this person worked at, that had this very successful law firm that was working, literally a well-known professional, I'm not going to say what sport it was because I don't want to give away the person's identity, but a well-known former professional athlete, someone that goes around the country making speeches to other professional sports teams in the sport that the person played, and has a very successful law firm with their billboards all over the city and just incredible success. And this person was saying that they didn't think that they were going to be able to get interviews with certain law firms because of where they went to law school 20 plus years ago. I couldn't believe it. Like the person with all this success in a prior life and then is worried about where they went to law school 20 years ago. And that even after being a professional athlete and doing all these things. So you have to just realize that who you are and what you do is that you can't be always comparing yourself to others, and you can't do that. But one of the problems with attorneys and committing is they always believe that they deserve more. They deserve just all the time. They always believe that they deserve more. So they believe that they deserve more money, more power, more recognition, all these sorts of things. I was looking at the Wall Street Journal the other day, and this is very funny. And again, if you're on one of these lists, probably are, it's very funny. But I was looking at this. There was an advertisement called Top Leading Lawyers or something. So Top Leading Lawyers, or something silly like that. And it was a full page ad in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And it listed like maybe 10 lawyers in New York and then maybe 20 in California, maybe 2 in Connecticut, that sort of thing. And what I realized is that these 2 in Connecticut, just every state had one, maybe one in Alaska. Every state had one person that was listed as a top lawyer. Was listed as a top lawyer. And what I realized when I saw that was that, and I looked into it, is that these lawyers are actually paying to be listed there, as if this paying for this is some sort of great thing. And really it's meaningless. But the idea is that because you're just paying to be in something where they're going to take out an ad and print your name along with a few hundred other people. Lawyers want more power. They want more prestige. They want more recognition. And often that's in their personal lives and also in their personal lives and also in their professional lives. If they don't feel like they're getting enough recognition or they don't feel like they're being treated the way they want, or they're not getting ahead, or their spouse isn't good enough, then they'll want to have more. And that makes it hard for them to commit because they believe that they need to be seen by others in a positive light. Now, this isn't for all attorneys, by the way. It's for certain attorneys, not all attorneys. So if an attorney doesn't feel like they're being recognized for the type of person that they can be, then they're often unable to commit. Sometimes if they don't think they're at a good firm, they're unable to commit. Sometimes if they don't feel like they're married or involved in someone in their personal life or the type of people that they should be involved, maybe they're unable to commit, will always be looking for something else and something different. I'm going to make a couple quick points before answering the next question, because this particular question that was asked is a good question. But there's also something that Americans hate when people talk about this. But there's just a few, I studied this in college and wrote about it. And so I'll just talk about it real briefly. But you have different classes in the country. You have your upper, middle, and lower class. But the big thing to just keep in mind is that not that concerned about what other people think about them. So what others think about them. Just think about who are some examples. Politicians would be like Trump, for example. I don't think he cares too much. Rich politicians are rich people. I don't think he really cares too much about what people think about him. He doesn't care if he's sued for violating laws, if he's charged criminally. He just doesn't care. Sons of important people. Think about Biden's son. I don't know. What is his name? I don't remember, but think about people like that. Like all these kind of issues with people like that. A lot of times people that have a lot of money or come from very powerful families and things, they're not really that concerned about what people think about them. And the same thing goes with people that maybe are, I would say, economically empowered, economically and socially empowered, not that concerned, and then economically and socially empowered. So I'll tell you why all this matters in a second. And then that would be, they also often don't care. When you have things that's funny, when you have like a crack act or that sort of thing started here, then immediately went here. And so a lot of times I'm not making these points to really make anybody feel badly or good or bad, but what I am making is then you have a class of people that do care what people think about each other. So lawyers are extremely concerned about what other people think. They're expected to act a certain way. The education is important. Education less important, right? Education less important. A lot of people out of very rich backgrounds. I just told you the example of Guy Gerber, right? From this very wealthy family. Not less important. Education less important. So then you have less important. Jobs important. Type of job is important. Type of job and prestige of lawyer. Pay important. All these things are important. Dress like others were. And the exact opposite happens up here. Maybe no job. Paris Hilton, all these sorts of people, maybe no job. Pay not important. So you have, so the point I'm making is you have this whole kind of class of people, which attorneys are part of, and there's nothing wrong with that, but or you're concerned about what other people think of you. If you're concerned about what other people think of you, you are always on the lookout for things that signal that kind of fit your definition of what success looks like. And your success is going to be different depending on the type of environment you come out of. And certain people you wouldn't think of them going to law school. If they did go to law school, you wouldn't think of them working very long. And other people, or if you come out of lower class, extremely important if they want to become middle class, So you have all these people in these class things and that are happening, and people are trying to do things. But I guess my point is that unless everyone's trying to, in the middle class, which lawyers are frankly, that's what they do. They're serving people that are economically and socially empowered with their services. They're very concerned about what other people think of them. So they're always trying to get ahead. And many times that translates into a lack of commitment, which may not necessarily happen. So this is just one of the reasons that people aren't able to commit, because they believe that they're not enough, and that they always need to get better, and they always need to try harder. So I believe, in terms of what I understand and what I've seen in terms of attorneys, that this is a lot of the struggle that's going on. They get into school and it's almost like they can become upward mobile in the middle class, and they can do all these things to become sort of more important. So they do all these things to try to become that. And I'm not trying to put people in a class distinction and stuff, but the majority of attorneys, almost all of them, are coming from this background. They're trying to prove things. Many times they aren't, but most of the time they are. So I think that has a lot to do with the levels of commitment that people have, because unless you're satisfied with who you are and what you can achieve in your personal, professional life, you're always going to try to be something else so you can rise higher and higher among your peers. It's very interesting. A lawyer goes to work with a bunch of other lawyers and they dress a certain way. all of a sudden that lawyer starts dressing a certain way, or they talk a certain way, and all of a sudden the lawyer starts talking a certain way. They want to be in better firms. They admire people that are in better firms. So they're never fully committed to that, or they may admire people with better social connections. And so they want that. So these are things that all these attorneys are doing, and they have different issues. Thanks for all these questions. These are great questions that people are asking. Just here. During interviews, I often struggle to explain a gap in my career due to personal reasons. How can I effectively address this without sounding uncommitted or unreliable? Okay, so people have gaps for all sorts of reasons. They have them because of health, psychology, unsure about career, direction, what else? All sorts of reasons. And employers will ask about this. Is something that you need to answer. So how do people answer these questions? So one of the ways you can answer them, if you say it was due to a personal issue, most employers will say, fine, they won't pressure you about what that was, but they will ask about that, what it was. I saw one resume this morning of one of my candidates who's interviewing, and that candidate said to the firm that they had taken time off because someone had a family problem. That one of their parents was very sick. Other people will sometimes move to other areas of the country or sometimes people will have children and take time off from practicing law. Sometimes people will need to be closer to children because someone is sick. Sometimes people will have various personal issues that have come up. Sometimes they'll be in the hospital or who knows. You can say you got sick. So there's usually explanations. So the explanations can be things about sickness, things about taking care of other people, things along those lines. And so you often need to talk about that. If you are trying to get back in a position after a gap, you should try to convince employers about how enthusiastic you would be to have a new position, how happy that would make you, how much you want a new position, how hard you would try in a new position. All these sorts of things to get people excited. So you want people to believe that because of the gap in your legal career, that when you come back, you're going to try harder and you're going to be a much better employee than someone that didn't have that gap. So this gap made you realize how much you want to go back to work. This gap made you even hungrier to practice law than you ever were before. And just a lot of very positive things about that gap that people are more likely to look at as a positive. You can also say that during your time off, you found yourself studying different aspects of your area of law, that you were trying to become a better person the whole time. All of these things can be very helpful in a gap. So a gap needs to look like a strength and not a weakness. So you turn this into a strength and not a weakness. And that is really the best piece of advice that I can give you. Folks. But yeah, coming up with answers that are more likely to be positive than negative. If you make that answer seem at all negative, then you're going to have a much more difficult time getting hired. I've been at the same firm for a significant portion of my career, but I worry it might be perceived as stagnation rather than commitment. How can I showcase growth and development while emphasizing my... that you're asking this question in terms of trying to get a new position. So what I would do if I was trying to get a new position and it was perceived as stagnation, I would try to show that you've been getting more and more responsibility, that you're managing entire matters yourself, that you're the go-to person for different types of clients, that you have done different types of things. For example, a litigator might start out doing discovery, and then motion, or maybe memos and discovery, then motion practice, then going and arguing motions, and being second chair of trials, or doing depositions and taking depositions of witnesses and taking depositions of the parties. And so there's more and more responsibility that people can get in each practice area during their position. But at some point, one of the best things is, if you're leaving, is law firms want to hire people that are are outgrowing their firms. So that's really the best type of hire for for a law firm. So if a law firm sees that, they're much more likely to hire you than if you don't appear like someone who's trying to outgrow their firm. So what does that mean? That means you want larger clients. You want larger clients. You want different. You want to run deals, or you want to run deals. You want to do trials. You want to work in a smaller firm where you have better opportunities to develop business. So all of these sorts of things are things that are going to be helpful to you. Or you want to work in a larger market, or in a larger market with more opportunity, or firm, or whatever firm, et cetera. So people like that. People like when people are trying to work in better environments, and when they're in places where they can potentially be outgrowing their firms. This is what law firms want. This is what they need to see. And if you're able to do that, that's a very positive thing. So there's nothing stagnating. Showing yourself as stagnating in one law firm and growing is actually very positive. One of the things that I see a lot is I see attorneys that, and it's, by the way, it's not as common as I'd like to see it, but what happens is an attorney will come out of law school and sometimes they'll start a job as a solo practitioner, won't even get a job. Then after a few years of doing good work, somehow they'll make it into someone will give them a chance at a smaller firm or something. Then they'll do very well in the smaller firm, and they'll just keep trying, and they'll come in a position where they're doing very well in the smaller firm, and where they can move to a bigger firm, and they move there, and then they get the bigger firm, and they keep trying and doing really well. They're not giving up, and then they move to an even bigger firm, and then they become a partner in the bigger firm, and then become head of the office of the bigger firm. So you can, if you're committed and you have persistence and all these things that I've spoken about, you can really do anything. If you're determined, you have persistence, you don't give up, and you really try your hardest, and you surround yourself with positive people, you can do very well. This person says, I've switched practice here a couple of times early in my career to find the right fit, but now I worry it might appear as indecisiveness on my resume. How can I frame these transitions positively to reflect my commitment to finding my passion in the legal field? Okay, so this is a good question. There's nothing wrong as long as you are in the practice area you want to be in, and now there is nothing to worry about, right? You're fine. So I don't know why you would be worried about this right now. What I recommend for attorneys that have switched practice areas earlier in their career and are now in the one that they want is when you talk about your experience in your resume, so you have job one or job three, which is current job, then you have job two, first job, and you have job one, first job. So all you would do, you would discuss your experience in one practice area. And just here, this literally is what I would do a lot of times. I would just put associate and then even job three or job one associate, and do not say a lot. Make it as consistent with job three as possible, or just do not give a lot of detail. That's it. Same thing with job one, not a lot of detail. You can certainly talk about the fact that you switched over to a different practice area. I would only do that as if you've been at this firm 2+ years or something like that. There's nothing wrong with becoming a different type of attorney a few years in. There's also the idea of moving up in terms of the prestige for your practice area. So what would that be? It could be like, you could maybe start out as doing corporate in real estate, or corporate real estate and litigation, or corporate and real estate. And then maybe your next job is doing residential real estate and concentrating on that. And maybe your current job is doing all commercial real estate. So you can sometimes frame these movements between jobs as positive upward mobility type movements. And to the extent you can do that, it's much more powerful in your resume than doing things the other way. I recommend, to the extent you can, doing what you can to try to either create upward mobility. What happened here? Good. Do what you can to show upward mobility, or emphasize, or you can embrace it and just basically say you were doing whatever you could to find the right fit. Upward mobility often is, you could be moving from defending individual personal injury suits as an insurance defense attorney to defending large scale disasters as a mass tort attorney. You could move from being a corporate attorney concentrating on doing registrations and general corporate work to maintaining companies, to doing mergers, or to doing private. So you can show upward mobility. A lot of times you need to think about, how does that look? How does upward mobility look on your resume? And then in addition to upward mobility, you can often de-emphasize your past jobs if you don't want to give a lot of detail, or you can embrace it and just basically talk about how you were trying to move into something. I don't think it's that big of a deal. What I like is, if you are convinced that you like a practice area and you really like it, the way to really start looking like you're very good at the practice area and like you're the kind of person that should be in that practice area is often when you start doing things like joining different groups within your practice area, meaning real estate bar groups. You're joining other real estate groups. You're writing papers or articles for publications about real estate law. You're doing things along those lines. And then you show like you're the best attorney. I was interviewing an attorney the other day that was unemployed, but had this great resume that had been at one job, but had done nothing but this practice area, and then had joined all of these state bar committees and things in that practice area, then had just an all around very strong background in that practice area, and it looked like it. So what you want your resume to show, in the best resumes should show the sense of the practice area. So extent of what you want to do. Someone should look at your resume and they should see that this is what you want to do, that this is where your skill is. This is what the person is about. Because the last thing you want to do is have a resume say corporate, litigation, and then say IP, trust and estates, and say personal injury, personal something like that, and then say activities, pro bono, entertainment lawyer. And this is, by the way, entertainment lawyers, so Memphis or whatever, that Memphis Society, just bar group, bar association. You get the idea. So this is what a lot of resumes do, because if you see a resume like this, you don't know what the hell you want to do with a person. Like, you can't figure it out. What is this? This person want to be an entertainment lawyer? What are they more interested in pro bono? Like, they did personal injury, workers' comp, then trust and estates, and now they're doing corporate. So people need to basically push you into one thing. If you want to do corporate, then this needs to look like corporate. And then if you can, this needs to look like corporate. And then corporate. And this needs to look like corporate. And this needs to look like corporate. So that's it. So once you do that, you actually have a good resume and someone's going to hire you. But if you start doing a bunch of other things and it makes it look like a bunch of different things, then you're going to have issues in terms of, okay, so I'm going to answer this question for this person. This is an interesting question. I know there's always a lot of international attorneys interested in these webinars. What guidance would you offer to an international attorney with a background in general practice who has accumulated approximately 3 years of experience across two law firms in a 3-year time frame, pursued a JD in the United States, passed the bar exam, yet are encountering challenges securing employment? Okay, so the issue is, for any attorney, for any employer. And so the first thing is, this is fixable and you can get a job. So that's the first thing. You can get a job, and getting a JD is much more valuable than just an LLM. You should be able to, I'm not sure, but you should be able to work in all 50 states with a JD. And those are some of the things that are important. There are roughly law firms in the US and 1.6 million, I don't know how many million practicing attorneys. But crazy. So there's just so many places and people you can work for. This is just something that anyone on this webinar should understand. The number of places and people that you can work for is astonishing. There are so many freaking places. It just blows my mind that you can work at. So you should never believe for any reason whatsoever that you can't get a job. It's just not the case. There are people everywhere that will hire you, and you do not have to really worry about ever getting a job. Here's a couple points, though, that I want to make. Foreign resumes different than U.S. resumes. You need to watch every webinar Harrison Barnes has done about resumes and see what the issues are, maybe holding you back. That's the first. So you have to watch every freaking webinar you possibly can and understand how to fix your resumes. Because if you have a bad foreign resume, and this goes for everyone that's not getting interviews, if you have a resume that does not look like a US resume, no one's going to hire you. Resume looks weird, right? So resume will look weird. So it's weird, and we don't want to hire weird things. So that's the first thing to realize. So foreign resumes are much different than US resumes. You need to make your resume look American. The second thing that's important is your resume should not talk about all the work you've done. Name the firm you worked in, title, and that's it. If you want to start talking about all these different practice areas that you've worked on and all these different general practice things, no one is going to be that impressed. People want to feel like they're trainable, and do not care about whatever you've done with another another country's legal system. That is completely irrelevant to them. And as a matter of fact, it hurts you to put that down because it looks like you have crazy habits. I was working with an attorney once, or I worked with an attorney, and this person was from a civil law country, meaning different than common law, which is like England, the US. And they couldn't understand, despite having gone to one of the top 5 law schools in the country, they never learned to understand the difference between state and federal law. So you should not be interested in talking about all the work you've done at another firm, maybe under certain types of corporate law that translate, but no, just as a U.S. attorney wouldn't talk about having been a general practitioner, which you shouldn't do if you can avoid it. Most U.S. law firms are not going to be interested in you having been a general practitioner in another country. That is going to scare them. That is, they want to hire people in a certain practice area and then believe that person can work in that practice area. It's just, that's it. They want to feel like you're trainable. They really don't care about your experience in another country's legal system. None of this is interesting to them in the least. And it's just not something that they want to hear a lot about. So I'm going to make a couple other quick points. Oh, geez, what just happened here? Another couple quick points. And this is helpful for everyone on this call, because this is something everyone should understand and you should understand. So why law firms hire attorneys? So the first reason that they hire attorneys, they look at 5 questions they ask is, can you do the job? And I do this, and by the way, on all of my interview prep candidates, they ask, can you do the job? Can you be managed? Will you do the job long-term? Do you want the job? Do we like you? And do we like you? So those are some of the questions that they ask. But there's one thing that I wanted to mention up here is, do you need sponsorship? So you probably do, right? So if you need sponsorship, what is so special about you that someone would hire you instead of someone else because of your background, right? Because when they need to sponsor you, right? This is what they're asking themselves. They're asking, why would we go through that? That's frightening to a law firm, right? That's frightening to a law firm, but they have to do all this stuff. We have to do all these things if we want to hire you. If we need to sponsor you, what does that mean? Why? No, if I was a law firm, by the way, if Harrison was a law firm, I would think that would be a good thing. I would because you likely stick around. That's how I would think. But most law firms aren't going to think about that. So your biggest obstacles to getting a job are probably your resume, the way it looks. Most foreign resumes look much different. Your resume probably shouldn't be talking about the work you've done. It should just name the title of the firm. Most people talk about all these different things that they've done, which just looks ridiculous to a U.S. law firm when they want you usually to specialized, and then having to specialize, needing sponsorship. And this applies to all attorneys. So you may have a resume that doesn't look good. You may have, and you should watch my webinars. You may have a resume that talks about all this different types of practice areas that you shouldn't do. And you may not have, I don't know, those are the big things. So the first one is, can you do the job? Without any law firm experience in law school, where you worked in a firm and maybe got an offer or something, they have no idea. Without any signs on your resume that you've worked with anyone in the US, that you are able to work under the kind of system that a law firm would work under, they don't know. But assuming you've had a couple of jobs or wherever you came from, they may feel that, but they may not. So they have to believe that you can be managed. In terms of doing the job long term, this is something that a lot of foreign attorneys have a problem with. What that means is that the law firm doesn't believe that they'll stick around. If you're from a foreign country and you don't have any connections in the US, the odds of you staying in the US and working in the US for your entire career are not good. They think that you'll probably go home at some point, because why wouldn't you? If your parents are there and your brothers and sisters are there. So this is what they're worried about. Do you want the job? Yes. They believe often that you want the job. And then do we like you? If you seem enthusiastic and you really want to work there, that you'll work hard, then they will hire you. These are the questions that law firms are asking. So I have a lot of articles about these things, but you need to ask yourself. I gave a long-winded answer to that because I felt that a lot of international attorneys do have that thought about, or there are a lot of international attorneys that are trying to get jobs in the US. Just a couple quick points. If you're an international attorney, you're much better off getting a JD than an LLM. An LLM, there are probably thousands of people that come over and get those each year. Very few of them end up getting jobs in the US. I do see a lot of international attorneys that get JDs and get jobs. Once you get a JD, you can work pretty much in most states around the country. You can take a bar in one state and then you can wade into another. So there's all sorts of things you can do. But yes, this is the most I can give you as advice, to fix your resume and to do a few other things like that. Okay, this looks like it's the last question, so then we'll wrap it up unless there's more questions. But this next question is saying, having transitioned from a larger firm to a boutique practice, I'm beginning to wonder if the change was the right move for my career. How can I determine if my practice setting currently accurately reflects my commitment to excellence and professional growth, given the unique dynamics of a smaller legal environment? Okay, so there are a few articles that I've written on BCG. There are benefits of boutiques, and the drawbacks of benefits or drawbacks of boutiques, something along those lines. There's a couple articles about that. So this is actually drawbacks. There are a couple articles on the site about this stuff. I definitely would recommend reviewing these articles because those will give you a lot more insight into that than what I'm doing here. So boutiques are useful for a lot of reasons. If you're in a certain practice area, you're often working with attorneys that do nothing but that practice area. So there are boutiques for different types of litigation. There are boutiques for different types of corporate law. There are boutiques for pretty much different types of patent law. Being in a boutique is good because you're surrounded by people that do nothing but that you can draw on one another with their individual experiences. And that can actually, you can become a much more effective attorney working in a boutique than you would be in another type of environment. Boutiques are actually very good. The drawbacks of boutiques are often that if you're in a practice area, it can fluctuate with the economy. It can be much more difficult for you to do well. And for example, corporate law can go up and down. Sometimes the demand for different practice areas can go up or down, so that can hurt you. But once you move to a boutique, generally you can often move back to a larger firm. One other benefit of a boutique often is that you can, if you have a very good reputation in that practice area, then clients will come to you and you can get those types of clients. Another benefit of working in a boutique often is that if you're able to get a position with a boutique, you're often going to become much more effective in your practice area. The drawbacks of boutiques are, there's a lot of them. One of the big drawbacks is often that if you're in a boutique, then it becomes much harder to bring in cross-selling opportunities. So an example would be if you're in a litigation boutique, you wouldn't have the ability to do corporate work for the client. You wouldn't have the ability to do real estate work for the client and that sort of thing. So that can hurt you as well. Then just a final benefit of boutiques often is that a boutique will enable you to attract clients often in that practice area that might not otherwise be attractive. So those are some of the main benefits. There's often also a little bit more instability at boutiques than there are in larger firms. So people tend not to move around as often in a boutique as they would otherwise. But I would read the articles. I think it's called The Benefits of Boutiques. So just do the search by Benefits of Boutiques by Harrison Barnes, BCG, something like that. And then once you do that, you can find that. And there's another article also that I wrote about the drawbacks of boutiques. Okay. Thank you everyone for being on this webinar today. I think that this was a very good topic just because it does show you some of the benefits of committing. I really would just take a look at your notes from this webinar and then also watch it after it goes live, because it will help explain to you a lot of the mistakes that you may have been making and maybe the things you've been doing right in your career so far, and give you insight into this. And for those of you that are new to the webinar this week, we do the same webinar every Wednesday. So we'll be back next Wednesday, and then the topics are typically sent out a few days in advance. So I think the next topic will go out to you on probably Monday or Friday of this week. So thanks again for being on the webinar, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their week. Thanks.